This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. And if you've listened to this podcast in the past, you probably know that we talk to other individuals who are going through life just like you and me. And oftentimes we've made plans very early on in life what our future is going to look like. And we start walking down that path, and guess what? It changes, and it can change day to day, minute to minute. It doesn't make any difference who we are. We all can hit rock bottom at times, and we don't expect that of individuals who maybe are in the limelight or have this glorious life, at least from where we're sitting in our living rooms. Last week, Nancy, how do you pronounce your last name?
Alspaugh-Jackson.
Alspaugh-Jackson. Okay. Didn't want to say it wrong. Nancy had posted something on Facebook, and I knew who Nancy was. I have followed her in the past because we both share a common interest, and that is autism. And we didn't choose autism when we were young and growing up, but it turns out that autism now is in both of our families, and it has given us a direction. But when I read this post, Nancy, I just sat there and thought, Nancy feels this way? How can she? She's got the world by, a kite. She's flying high. And then I realized, wait a second, that doesn't make a difference. If we hit rock bottom, we hit rock bottom. So Nancy, thank you for agreeing to come on Avoid the Maze and publicly sharing your message last week. So can you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and what made you post that?
Well, Karen, I've had about 3 or 4 different careers. I was a television producer for 25 years, an Emmy Award-winning television producer. Wrote 2 books on fearless aging for women and did public speaking and motivational speaking. And then when my son Wyatt, who is now 20, was diagnosed with autism, I dove into that world and ended up running a nonprofit called Autism Care Today, Act Today, and did that for 14 years. And then my husband passed away 6 years ago. And that is when I hit rock bottom shortly after that. And if you'd like, I can read the post, Karen.
I would love that, because I think it's important for our listeners to understand that you put it out there hoping to help yourself, but also to reach other people who might be going through similar circumstances.
Yeah, I have to say that I was a little bit reluctant to hit that post button after I wrote it. I thought, is this too intimate? Is this too raw? I'm sharing things here about my life that some people would never believe. But a voice inside me said, have faith over fear. This could help other people. And I hit that post button, and I've been blown away by the response, Karen, of people that have reached out to me with words of encouragement and support, and also people that have their own addiction struggles that shared those with me.
Okay. So why don't you go ahead and read it? And
Okay.
I'm asking our listeners, if you don't get it the first time, rewind the podcast and listen to it again.
I believe we are only as sick as our secrets, and that, as Christ said, the truth will set you free. So here goes. A little less than 3 years ago, I was a broken woman. I had been struggling for 6 years since the death of my husband, Ree, who died from a long and horrific battle with cancer. I had lost everything financially. I was trying to balance running my nonprofit and raise my autistic son, Wyatt. I never allowed myself time to grieve. I thought God had abandoned me, when in fact, I had abandoned God. I had struggled off and on my whole life with drug and alcohol addiction, as well as addiction to other forms of escape, addiction to working out, anything to numb myself, to not feel emotional pain. This time, I found myself hitting bottom. I was on 4 Xanax a day, 4 anti-depressants, Ambien to sleep, all washed down at night with a bottle of wine or vodka. Thank God for my friends and my brother who helped me go into detox at a hospital for a week, then into rehab for 2 months at the oldest women's recovery center in the country, Friendly House. Here is my goodbye to drugs and alcohol letter that I wrote while in treatment. I call it Love Letter. We've had a relationship for 5 decades now, the longest love affair of my life. I'm sick of your lies. You conned me into believing you could make the depression and anxiety go away. You lied to me. You made me lose contact with family and friends from the age of 14 on, when I started using everything from pot to LSD, quaaludes to heroin, anything to give me a sense of comfort. What a false comfort it was. The 1-inch scar on my hand from shooting with an infected needle at the age of 16 is a permanent reminder of your damage. You made me believe you could make the shame of having a brother with Down syndrome, the pain of having an alcoholic mother go away. Despite your help, I still had to watch as you robbed her beautiful spirit of much of the joy of life. Even with all your power, you couldn't erase the pain of my childhood and teenage years. With you by my side, I entered into sexual relationships that left me with self-loathing and disgust. You lied to me throughout my first marriage when you told me I was never enough, never pretty enough, never skinny enough. You told me all those feelings could be erased by the bottle of wine I drank on a nightly basis. It didn't matter to me that for all those years, I risked my health and happiness to keep our relationship going strong. I thought you were a way to escape the problems. All lies. You tricked me into believing I could escape the pain of having a child with autism, but when you wore off, you left me with reality. I numbed myself with you to help me deal with my husband's cancer. You were there on the day he died in my arms. I thought it was so much easier with you by my side. So many times I tried to quit you and failed. I just couldn't say goodbye to the effect you had on me, the way you transported me to a place where my problems melted away, your chemical high seducing me every time. This breakup has been one of the hardest things I've ever done. I need to remember the sick feelings of dread and fear you gave me when I needed you most. I need to remember how you left me trembling and shaking without you. I need to remember the hell of detox, so I'll never be tempted to go back with you again. I want to quit you for good. I want to leave treatment as a woman of grace and dignity, with my head held high. Dear drugs and alcohol, I'm ready to break free of you. I'm finally ready to face the truth without you. Through treatment in AA, I have been able to rebuild my life. I no longer regret the past or wish to shut the door on it. And if my story can help others, then I know I am living in God's will. I'm excited for the new chapters in my life. I'm a momager to my awesome autistic artist son, Wyatt. I host a webcast on Autism Live. I'm teaching fearless aging. With the amazing Ava Lund, we have started a new venture at Special Spirit Ranch called Recovery at the Ranch, a half-day program utilizing the healing power of horses and animals to help those in drug and alcohol treatment. With the help of loved ones, God, and AA, I have finally found the meaning of the quote inscribed in my grandmother Diddy's Bible. I sought my soul, but my soul I could not see. I sought my God, but my God eluded me. I reached for my brother, and I found all three.
So again, as I read this on Facebook, it was like, is Nancy writing a story for us? This can't be you. And that's what a lot of us see when we don't really open up and share what's going on. And I know I grew up in a household where my mother always said, don't hang out your dirty laundry for everybody to see.
Right.
And I agree, but I don't agree, because if we don't know what somebody is going through, there's no way that we can offer a helping hand. We can't fix it for you. But like you said, your brothers helped you get into rehab, and that was the helping hand. Once you got there, it was up to you to make the changes that you needed to make. So as I listened to this again, and I've read it probably once a day since I saw it posted, because I want to remind me that So many of us get addicted to something
Right.
that can totally destroy us. And last night I mentioned to you that when my son was diagnosed with autism, my husband and I became addicted to anger.
Mm,
We lost friends as soon as we admitted that he was on the spectrum. We had family members who didn't want to accept it because he was such a cute little boy doing all little boy things.
right.
Um, and so anger just bubbled out of us over and over again. And that was one of his, um, I guess I could call it symptoms. Um, when he was growing up, he would get angry very easily. And so we all adapted to it. But it's within like the last 5 years that we have all made this concerted effort. You know what? We're addicted and we got to get off this band. And we are, but we still sometimes fall back into that black hole. So tell us, you know, you mentioned a little bit about your youth, that you had an alcoholic mother, you had a brother with Downs, and back in the day, um, Downs was not as open as it is today. So that had to have been difficult for you, correct?
Yeah, Karen, it really was. It was a different time. First of all, with my mother's alcoholism, um, it was definitely within our family a don't mention it, don't talk about it. But it was an open secret. All the
Yeah.
family knew, all the neighbors knew, everybody in Richmond, Virginia
Yeah.
practically knew because she was a binge drinker. My father traveled a lot for business and she would drink when he went away, and I mean, get falling down drunk. It wasn't unusual for me to come home from school and find her passed out on the kitchen floor. So I learned at a very early age not to bring friends home, to isolate. I learned shame at an early age. And that was compounded having a brother with a disability. As you mentioned, my younger brother, David, had Down syndrome. And these were the days I remember the kids on the bus taunting me with the words retard, retard. Your
Right.
brother is a retard. So I had what I thought was the double whammy. Who wanted to bring friends home to a house that had a drunk mother and a disabled brother? So I learned to hang out with the druggies, the dropouts, the misfits. And that's when my own drug abuse began. Um, I did anything, Karen, to numb out, to escape. I sought comfort in drugs and alcohol at a very young age. I believe I was 13 when I had my first drink and started smoking pot and experimenting with other drugs. And it got bad. As you heard in my goodbye letter to drugs and alcohol, I experimented with heroin. I shot heroin. Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson shot heroin. And not only did I shoot it, I'm lucky to be alive because the veins in my arm were too small to shoot it. And I shot it in my hands, in the veins in my hands, ended up getting a very bad infection and cysts developed and had to have those surgically removed. And do you know what my father would tell people after that I had to go in for that hand surgery? That I slammed my hand in the door. No one would talk about it.
And and
So
and that's a big difference between today and when we were growing up.
right, we're open today. People are so much more willing to get help, to go to rehab for their addiction issues. It is a different time, but this was during the 60s and early 70s. And my family suffered greatly for it. I want to also say there was a lot of love in my family. My mother and father did the best they could. I think my father had enormous guilt over leaving my mother with three children to raise, one with a disability, and him going out into the world and having this rich, full life, and she being saddled with these responsibilities. And my mother never got sober, Karen. She went to rehab once, but she never got sober. But I made amends with her. I made my peace with her. I told her I forgave her for her alcoholism and how much I loved her. And I know now she was doing the best she could. She was really a product of the era,
Right.
a product of the time.
Well, back in the 50s and 60s, we expected people to walk around with the drink in their hand.
Mhm.
Um, for dads to come home from work and mom to pour a cocktail for them and maybe sit down and before dinner and talk about their day. Um, it's not the same today as it was then. I don't, in some ways, I think it may be worse than it was back then, but
Mhm.
it all looked social. And um, I'm blessed. I was brought up in a household where drinking was social. I don't think I ever saw my parents uh, drink to excess. Doesn't mean they didn't, but I never witnessed anything like that. Um, but we hear more and more about some of our friends who grew up in households right next door to us with these conditions. And I can understand that the escape for you was necessary. Um, if mom was falling down drunk or just not accessible to you when you needed her, you had to go look for that comfort somewhere else. Um, so nobody can blame you for that. The only one who can change it, as I said before, is you. And your brothers helped you at some point say, okay, we're going to guide you, and it's up to you to take the reins. So when you went into rehab, did you go in kicking and screaming, or did you go in and say, okay, we're going to make this work?
Karen, I knew I needed help.
Okay.
Um, to be honest with you, I didn't want to live anymore. The only reason I was staying alive was for my son, Wyatt. I thought, what will he do without me? My son with autism, how is he going to get by in this life without me to help him? And I was alone. Reed, my husband, had died, as I said, after a very, very long, horrific battle with cancer. And I don't really have a lot of family in California. Most of my family's back east. And I have an older brother, but he had his own life. And I was really isolating. I was isolating with the drugs and the drinking. I would wake up in the morning and I would pop that first Xanax because I would wake up shaking and trembling, literally
Sure.
unable to face the day. So I would pop that first Xanax. And then around mid morning, I'd take the second one. And this was all while I was running Autism Care Today. I was literally hanging by a thread. Mid afternoon, I would take the third Xanax. Sometimes I would drive to the alcohol, the store, the liquor store up the street, buy a bottle of wine and drink it in my car. I remember one particular day coming in from doing that and throwing up in my trash can beside my desk. When I got home from work, I would take the fourth Xanax, and then I would take the Ambien, sometimes not just right before bed, but before that. And then I would open a bottle of wine and I would drink it all by myself. Um, so I was literally barely functioning. I mean, I'm not a large person, and it's kind of a miracle that I'm alive. Um, these are all highly addictive substances. I could have overdosed. I do remember having blackouts. I remember one day waking up in my bed in the afternoon and in a panic thinking, I didn't pick Wyatt up from school. I jumped in the car, and this is like 4 o'clock, an hour after school had ended. I jumped in the car, raced over to school. Nobody was there, of course. I then called his aide, Andrea, and said, I don't know where Wyatt is. And she said, Nancy, I picked him up an hour ago. I had completely blacked out and completely forgotten it. So I was not functioning. I had no business driving. I was not taking good care of my son. Thank God for his aides that helped me with him and live here with me, a married couple. Um, my life was a wreck. I was a broken woman. And like I said, I didn't want to live anymore. So I called my brother and said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And I called a friend who I knew had been in rehab for drug and alcohol addiction. And they immediately got to work in finding me a place. And as I said in my letter, I had to go to detox first.
Sure.
The Xanax, the benzos, as they're called, were so much in my system that I had to do a medically supervised detox. They had to give me phenobarbital. They took me off the Xanax and gave me phenobarbital. And it was one of the worst experiences of my life. I can still remember being in that hospital bed, staring up at that ceiling, thinking, if this is the most miserable thing I have ever gone through. I remember being so sick, shaking, and just being nauseous, and really, oh, I thought nothing can be worse than this. So I had to go through that for a week before even going into the recovery and rehab center, which I was blessed to go into Friendly House, which is the oldest drug and rehab center for women in the country. And they have an amazing program. And I was there for another 2.5 months. You know, I had to just let go of my life, let go of Wyatt, let go of everything. And at this point, I have to say that my job at Act Today had ended. Um, we were no longer bringing the money in to run the nonprofit, and how
Sure.
much of that had to do with my addiction issues is, you know, there's probably some correlation there. So, and my husband and I had lost everything financially with his cancer battle. We used to have a beautiful home in Hidden Hills, California, you know, where the Kardashians live and many celebrities. And he lost his job due to his cancer battle, and we lost our home in Hidden Hills. So I was a broken woman. There's no doubt about it. I hit my bottom, as they say in the
Right.
program, and I had to really just start my life over again.
And so what I'm hearing you say is that some of it was your fault because you fell into this addiction,
Absolutely.
but there were so many other outside circumstances that were coloring your world to the point that it's very difficult to deal with.
Oh,
And the one thing that I can, relate to, I love my son who's on the spectrum, but were times, especially when he was younger, that um, I was angry that he was on the spectrum, not because what he was going through, but because what I was going through. And I've heard from a lot of families that have children on the spectrum that happens. We don't hate our child. It's not that we don't want to help them, but sometimes we just don't have that energy anymore because it's taken so much out of us.
it's a difficult road. The challenges are immense. And Karen, you and I were talking, I think, last night about my belief that addiction is rampant in the special needs parenting community.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, after writing that post, I got several replies to it from other women who said they had the same struggle. One woman with the exact same struggle. Her husband had died. She had a son with autism. She turned to the bottle, and now she's clean and sober. But she said, I related so much. I think that it's such a difficult road being a special needs parent. And it's so hard to find the support. We're lucky if we can find a community of people that have the same issues we do and help us through. I mean, that's the only way to get through.
Right.
It's finding a community of people. But it's not an easy road for anybody. And particularly when you're a single parent, widowed as I was, the challenges were enormous. And I have to say, I was terrified about raising my son alone. Terrified. I thought,
I,
do I have it in me to do this? I don't know if I can do this.
and for those of you who are listening, um, autism is this very wide spectrum. And I hope people can totally understand that, because when my son was diagnosed, he was 6 years old. So for the first 6 years of his life, he was a typical child. I didn't see any differences. But the day that we got his diagnosis, all I could remember is a TV show that I had watched for years called Saint Elsewhere. And there was a little boy on there by the name of Tommy, who was the cutest little boy. but he was on the lower end of the spectrum.
Mhm.
And I kept looking at my son saying, but it's not the same. And we had people who even looked at us and said, why are you saying he's on the spectrum? He doesn't look autistic. And I felt like saying, what does autism look like? And nobody could give me an answer. But my husband and I really were alone. We did join a couple support groups, but only to find out because my son is very high functioning. Even the people in those support groups doubted that we belonged there, which was very, very difficult. And so I understand that when people hear the word, they may want to run away from it. And that's what our friends did. They were afraid that if their kids played with my son, their children would become autistic. And all I could do was laugh. It's like, really? It's not a contagious disease. He doesn't have the chicken pox that he's going to spread to your kids. And again, I can't imagine how you did it as a single mom, going through everything you were going through.
Well, Karen, you bring up a really important point about autism and the autism spectrum. It is a spectrum disorder, and it's a wide range, as you said, from high functioning and then to severely affected nonverbal. But each one of those carries its own distinct challenges.
Yes.
Sometimes I think it's even harder for the parents who have the high functioning kids because they're aware of my son is not really aware. He knows, he's been told he has autism, but he's not aware of the real differences. I think when he was younger, he was severely affected. He's moderate now, but through a lot of therapy and other interventions. But when you have a higher functioning kid, they are aware that they're not like the other kids. And that shame and embarrassment and that inability to fit in is really difficult. So it doesn't matter whether you have a nonverbal child, a severely affected child, a moderate child, or a high functioning Asperger's kid. Each one of those things comes with its own unique set of challenges.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's strange that we were talking about it yesterday because I've been going through some medical challenges myself. And yesterday I finally got a diagnosis and I was like, oh, okay, I understand it. But in that diagnosis, the word heart failure was mentioned. And I remember, and I sat there, my husband was sort of behind me, and I looked at the doctor and I said, am I dying? And he goes, everybody's heart does fail as they get older. He said, you're not dying now. This is what we can do to get you better. And I just looked at him and I said, I'm glad I asked, because 10 years ago, I would have walked out of here in tears because I heard the word heart failure. The same way when my son was diagnosed on the spectrum, I remember walking out of the doctor's office in tears because I don't know how to be a parent to a special needs child. But we can learn the same way you have learned to fight your addiction.
Yeah, I am no longer, look, my life is far from perfect. And the challenges, Wyatt had a massive tantrum last night. It's not as bad as the days when he was younger, Karen. He would have tantrums, multiple tantrums a day, where he would bite, scratch, kick me, scream for an hour on end. I used to have to cover the bite and scratch marks on my arms with makeup. It was that severe. And tantrums that left me shaking and trembling in fear of how am I going to deal with this. He had a tantrum last night. It lasted for a while. It was an outburst. He perseverated. He yelled. He went to his room finally. But now, and I think this is because of AA, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I'm not going to change the fact that Wyatt has autism, but I can change my reaction to it. I can pray for the courage to love him unconditionally, and the courage to see disability as an opportunity, because it has been in my life. It's led to many great things. Um, so I think that's because of my 12-step program that I'm able to do that.
Well, and also what I know about Wyatt, again, through social media,
Mhm.
is that he's a phenomenal artist.
Unbelievable.
And that's something that we don't often look at to say, and I talk about this in all of our podcasts. We all have something very special that we can do. For a long time, I thought my specialty was keeping a spotless house. And that's what it was for a long time. I was so into wanting my house to look like, Good Housekeeping magazine.
God bless you. I didn't get that gene.
Oh, I'll tell you, after a while, I finally said, what am I doing this for? It's driving me crazy. But we all have those specialties, and whatever they are, we need to accept them and allow them to flourish. And especially for individuals who are on the spectrum, because that can give them the growth that they need. And it's one of the things that my son really talked about in high school and his early college days. He was a public speaker here in the Cleveland area, and he would go out to schools and tell kids, whether you're on the spectrum or not, what do you do well?
Mhm.
Build upon that. And we have a friend whose son is a twin, and he's on the spectrum. And he kept telling my son, Alex, I want to be in show business. And his parents kept thinking, that's going to be tough for him. He lets his brother talk for him. He lets his baby sister talk for him. It's never going to work. And my son encouraged him. He said, if you really want to do it, start getting into school plays, do whatever you can. He flourished in high school. He was in every audition, every play, whatever. Now he lives in Chicago. He's doing stand-up comedy. And, it's not that his parents didn't want to believe, but they were fearful because he wasn't taking action on his own. And
Mhm.
now he does. So kudos to Wyatt for his art. And I understand people are coming out of the woodwork and wanting to buy art from him too.
He's selling quite a bit. We're blessed. He's doing a lot of commission portraits. He loves to paint dogs, and people are commissioning him to paint their dogs, their cats. He did his first portrait of my best friend that turned out incredibly well. So we're getting lots of commissions. As I said, I'm a momager. It's a lot of work. I'm at UPS every other day. I'm packing and shipping and coordinating all the details, but I'm thrilled for him. And it wouldn't be possible without his amazing teacher who knows how to talk to him and work with him. What will we do, Karen, without those teachers that have been so instrumental in our children's lives?
You are absolutely correct. There are teachers out there, there are mentors out there, and sometimes all we have to do is ask. I know that one of my son's teachers was the music director, and if it weren't for him, I think Alex would have probably had more tantrums in school than he did. But if he was walking down the hall and he saw Mr. Valley, he would snap and go, I'm going to be good now. I'm going to hold it in.
Mhm.
And I don't even think this teacher ever told Alex, not to leash out, but there was something about his demeanor with Alex.
Mhm.
And because of it, we've seen huge changes. And now at age 31, other than maybe once or twice a year, I wouldn't even remember that he was on the spectrum.
Right.
And but yet he lets people know all the time that he is, because he said, I wouldn't change who I am.
Good
And
for
that to
him.
me is beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Good for
And,
him.
and I think that's what I'm hearing that you're saying. Even though I went through all this and I did all these things that,
Sorry for the barking dog.
oh, how adorable. Oh,
Oh,
God,
yes, even though I went through all this, as you were
um, you've decided that you're going to make good out of it.
You know, also in AA, there is the promise that no matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. And that's what I'm seeing. I know my life has a purpose. I do believe that none of these were accidents. I am extremely grateful to have survived that dark period of my life. And it's only by helping others and spreading the word. I'm very active in AA. I lead a lot of meetings. I do a lot of commitments in AA, and reaching out to other alcoholics and addicts. And that's really the good stuff when you can see how you help other people. There's nothing like it.
Well, when you're helping somebody else, you are helping yourself.
Absolutely.
And it's not a selfish thing. You know, I remember growing up, my grandmother always used to say to me, Karen, make somebody happy, you're going to be happy. But I didn't do it for the right reasons. Okay. I mean, I was trying to make everybody happy and I made myself miserable. Okay. And it wasn't until about 10 years ago that I basically woke up one day and my son said to me, Mom, you're really depressed. And I looked at him and I said, No, I'm not. He goes, Yes, you are. And when he said it the second time, I started crying like a baby. And I said, How can you tell? He said, You haven't done anything for yourself in years.
Mm.
And I looked at him and what do you want me to do for myself? He said, When was the last time you went out and you bought yourself a new pair of shoes or a shirt? You're always doing for me and Dad. You're always doing for people at work. And that's when he said to me, I'm not going to let you do it anymore. And that's coming from my son who's on the spectrum, who a psychologist once told us he would not amount to anything, that we should plan on putting him into a halfway house and he would do menial work.
Look at
And
that.
we all looked at her at that time. My husband ran out screaming that he wanted nothing to do with her. My son ran out after his father to calm his father down. I sat there and just yelled at her. How could you say that in front of my son? Even if it turns out to be true, why would you say it in front of him? Because by doing that, you could have stunted him right where he is, and maybe he wouldn't amount to anything. And, we didn't let that stop us. We just kept going forward. It's difficult, and we can all face these downward spirals for any reason. So here you are, you've posted this last week, you're getting a lot of good response. Where do you want to go next?
Well, first of all, with Wyatt, I want him to have the most productive, happy life he can. And that, of course, his artwork is part of that. He's flourishing with that, and we built it into a little business. So that is really wonderful. And he's got a year and 8 months left of vocational school. And then after that, they call it falling off the cliff, Karen, when they
Right.
get out of school. So I am busy looking at programs and options for him when he graduates, day programs where he will learn job skills. He says he wants to work at Pavilion, so we'll see. He is doing some work at Smart and Final, shelving and stocking and learning those things. So I want to support him to be the most productive individual possible. Then professionally, as I mentioned, I started a program at Special Spirits Ranch out in Sunland for drug and alcohol individuals, utilizing animal and equine therapy to help them overcome their addictions. I had been in a program like that when I was in rehab at Friendly House, and I'd been around horses all my life and used to ride competitively. And when I experienced that program, I thought, I could do this. So I had that kind of in the back of my head, and now that's come to fruition. So I'm really happy about that. About 20 years ago, I wrote a book called Not Your Mother's Midlife, a 10-step guide to fearless aging, and a photo essay book called Fearless Women Midlife Portraits, with a wonderful partner named Marilyn Kent. Marilyn and I on Monday are set to do our first Fearless Aging Together class on Zoom. We've got a group of women that are going to be taking part in that with us. So that's another thing I'm pursuing. And I still do Autism Live. I do a show called Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy on the Autism Live network. It airs on Thursday mornings. I work with the remarkable Shannon Penrod on that. So my life is really, really full and productive. As I said, it's not always perfect. I have many challenges and many bumps in the road, but there's a lot of beautiful things in it, and I'm able to do it one day at a time.
And that's the big thing, one step at a time.
Right.
Because if we try to just run through it, we're not going to accomplish what we need to. And what we need is to feel happy internally. That doesn't mean we're laughing 24/7. It took me a long time to understand what happiness was. And happiness can be contentment at this moment. It can be exhilarating. And sometimes it can be sad,
Yeah.
but that's okay. We can get through it. And I am just so amazed how many people that I have shared your message with have turned to me and said, I'm glad she wrote that, because that's something I would have written. And my comment is, then go ahead and write it.
Right.
Get it out.
Don't be afraid to share your journey, because by sharing our journey, we give others the courage to share theirs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much. But before we end this, you have the 10 steps to empowerment. Do you want to tell me what made you write this and what it really means to you?
Okay. How much time do we have, Karen?
As much as you need.
Okay. I wrote these when Wyatt was about 6 or 7, and it was really based on my journey with him, things that I found were helpful for me. And it was a video series on Autism Live, and I think it's still available. If you go to autismlive.com, you can see the video series. But I called it my 10 Steps to Empowerment for Special Needs Parent, and I'll go through them. The first step is accept and embrace this challenge. And by acceptance, I don't necessarily mean loving it. I'm the first to admit that I kind of hate autism for what I feel like it stole my child's childhood. But I'm not in denial. I was in denial in the beginning. I have to admit that. I didn't want the diagnosis. I didn't take him in until he was 3. He was not adequately diagnosed till he was 4. I sat in denial for a while, but denial kept me from walking a path that I ultimately needed to walk. So I urge people to get out of denial. Number 2 is educate yourself. We are so lucky. We have the University of Google, right?
Yes.
There is so much we can find out. I mean, even back in 2002 and 3, when I was looking for things, it was a little bit more difficult to find. There are so many resources. And Karen, think about 40 years ago when refrigerator mother syndrome was the term for mothers of children with autism. 40 years ago, women were blamed for their child's autism, for supposedly the inability to bond with their child.
Right.
We didn't have any supports. We are so lucky today that we can find out so much. There's so much information out there. Number 3 is get support. One person alone can be tenacious and hardworking. 2 people with the same intention create power. And you see this everywhere. You see this with groups like the Autism Community in Action, which started with just a group of parents getting together and now has grown into a national organization that has support groups and mentors and all kinds of things. So one of my favorite quotes is by Margaret Mead: "Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. In fact, is the only thing that ever has." So there's power in numbers.
Right.
Number 4 was a really important lesson for me. Don't compare, run your own race. So many times I have heard about how other people's children are doing, and that green-eyed monster jealousy creeps in. And I think, why can't Wyatt be doing that well? And when I think that way, it's interesting. The universe always seems to throw something up for me. Like the other day, I was at his baseball game, and I was just looking at the children in wheelchairs, the children that were severely affected, that are nonverbal. And I thought, Nancy, you have nothing to complain about. This is your journey. Wyatt is an individual. He's your child. So I think we have to stop comparing and run our own
Absolutely.
race. Number 5 is shore up spiritually. If I didn't have my belief in God, and if I didn't have my church, I would have been a wreck. I really encourage people to find something that speaks to their soul. It doesn't have to be a church. It could be a practice. It could be, a spiritual practice, but it can help sustain us in these challenges. Number 6 is you talked about this earlier, Karen. Recognize your gifts and abilities. Don't tell me you don't have a talent. Everybody has a talent. And I say, learn to use it and be proud of it. And it will help you on this journey. You might be a
Absolutely.
great networker. You might know how to reach out to other moms. You might be a great writer where you can write your story, blog about it. You might be a great leader and get into running a nonprofit for autism or disabilities like I did. So recognize that. Number 7 is live in gratitude, give back. And I believe in the law of karma. The more we give, the more we receive. I really believe that the more grateful I am, the more generous my spirit becomes. So every night I write a gratitude list. I don't go to bed without writing that list. I put at least 5 things on it. It always starts with my sobriety, but it's interesting because I always come up with more than 5 things. I think when we live in gratitude, and giving to others is one of the most powerful things we can do for ourselves.
Absolutely.
Number 8 is to state your intention. Live in a state of knowing your child will get better. When we state our intentions, and I used to have stick-em notes on my desk where the first one was helping Wyatt was the number 1 intention. Helping other families and inspiring others was number 2. We need goals, and we need to look at those goals. That can really help. You need to visualize it, believe it, and you can achieve it. Number 9 is to trust your intuition. You did that day with that doctor who told you your child would never achieve anything. No one, and I mean no one, knows your child better than you. Don't let anybody tell you what advice that doesn't ring true to you.
Absolutely.
In your gut, you know what's best. Number 10 is another important one. And the last one, live in the moment, laugh, love thyself. Don't miss your child's youth. I missed a lot of Wyatt's because I was so caught up in the world of autism and in my own negative feelings. Don't miss this day. This moment is all we have. And laugh, find joy. Very important.
Well, whether we have somebody on the spectrum or not, we all should be living by these 10 points. I'll tell you that sometimes it's very difficult to, as you said in the beginning, accept and embrace challenges, because it's like you think that your whole life has been a challenge. And that's how I felt 10 years ago when my son identified that I was depressed. But as soon as I accepted that I was, it was like, okay, what am I going to do about it? And, um, it took me a couple of weeks to let it all absorb. And then I said, I know what I'm going to do, because I didn't want to make it worse for him or my husband or my mother, who was still alive, who swore that she didn't even understand depression. So, for all of you out there listening, uh, hopefully before you hit rock bottom, you'll find a ladder to start climbing up, or a rope to pull yourself up, or take somebody's hand. But just know that we're put on this earth to live, not to destroy ourselves. And Nancy, I'm so excited that you are on a healing path and that you get to enjoy Wyatt now. You may have missed some time in the past, but you're enjoying him now.
I
And
am, Karen. And I do have an empowerment prayer that I'd like to read.
sure,
Goes with the steps. God grant me the wisdom to see disability as an opportunity, the courage to love my child unconditionally, and the faith to live a life of purpose.
how wonderful. Again, I want to thank you for joining us. We're going to have you back, because you are involved in so many different things that I love the empowerment for women. There are so many women out there today that they need to know that they can get their life on the right track.
Right. And age is just a number. I mean, I'm going to be 67 next month, and I say, bring it on. I expect to live till I'm 100. So I've got a lot of living left to do.
Well, we do another show just to put this in your ear. It's called The Rant, and it's about aging magnificently.
Mhm.
And the woman who is the host of it, she went back to school in her 40s. She is in her 80s. She's a writer. She's a public speaker. She teaches classes online. And we believe that you can do things that you want to do. But again, don't compare to anybody else, because you're going to do it your way on your timetable, and that's okay.
Marilyn and I would love to come on that show. So let's talk about that later.
Absolutely will. Thank you so much. Stay well.
Thank you, Karen.
And can you post anything, any of Wyatt's pictures, so we could share them and get people interested?
They're all posted on Facebook.
They are. Okay.
Yes, on my site, Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson. They're all posted. He has his own site, Wyatt, Wyaart, Autism. So they can see them there as well.
Wonderful. I want to put that in the show notes. I want everybody to see his work and understand that there's greatness in all of us.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, sweetheart.
I really enjoyed being a guest and talking with you this morning.
Very good. We'll talk to you soon. Take
Okay.
care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.